I'm standing in my manager's glass-walled office, my tote bag still clutched in my hand from rushing in. My heart is pounding, but not from work stress, from the panic that's been clawing at me since last night. Alexander Alden, my boss, leans back in his chair and says, loud enough for the whole office to hear, "You're done here, Vivian. You can't just disappear whenever you want." My throat goes dry. He's firing me for taking one unpaid day off to look for my mom, who's in the late stages of dementia and went missing from her nursing home. Every hour she was out there alone could have been life or death. I stand frozen as his words slice through me, shame mixing with pure disbelief. The rest of the office is pretending to type, but I can feel their eyes on us. He's enjoying this, asserting power, showing that rules only bend for his favorites. Alexander's smirk grows wider as he watches me process what just happened. But I don't give him the reaction he's expecting. Instead, something cold settles in my chest. I know something about Alexander Alden, something that could destroy him. I step closer to Alexander's desk, lowering my voice so only he can hear. The office noise fades to background static as I lean in and whisper just one name, Martha Drake. His smirk vanishes instantly. The color drains from his face like someone pulled a plug. His confident posture crumbles. And for the first time since I've known him, Alexander Alden looks genuinely scared. His mouth opens and closes like a fish gasping for air. How do you? He stammers but can't finish the sentence. I straighten up, adjusting my tote bag strap on my shoulder. We'll talk later, Alexander, I say calmly, using his first name for the very first time. Or maybe we won't. I turn and walk out of his office without another word, knowing I've just flipped the entire game. Behind me, I can hear him trying to recover, clearing his throat and shuffling papers, but his hands are shaking. The walk to my desk feels like it takes forever. My coworkers are staring, but I keep my head high. I've just taken control of this situation, and Alexander has no idea what's coming next. Growing up in a small Ohio town, I learned early that life wasn't fair. My childhood was spent running barefoot through summer fields, but always with the knowledge that money was tight. Mom, Carol, worked double shifts as a nurse to keep us afloat after Dad left when I was 8. Our little house sat at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by cornfields that stretched to the horizon. Carol would come home exhausted, her scrubs wrinkled and her feet aching, but she'd still help me with homework at our tiny kitchen table. Kindness is strength, Vivian. She'd tell me when I complained about kids at school who had more than us. Don't ever forget that being good to people isn't weakness, it's the hardest thing you can do. Those words shaped everything about who I became. When other kids made fun of my hand-me-down clothes or our rusty car, I learned to keep my dignity intact. Carol taught me that real power came from knowing who you were, not what others thought of you. She also taught me to observe and listen. People tell you everything you need to know if you just pay attention, she'd say while tending to her patients. After high school, I moved to Chicago for college, leaving behind the cornfields for concrete and skyscrapers. The transition was brutal. I shared a cramped apartment with 3 other girls, worked nights at a diner, and studied whenever I could find a quiet corner. College taught me to adapt quickly and navigate tough personalities. My communication studies major meant lots of group projects with people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. I learned to bite my tongue, do my share of the work, and let others take credit when it meant avoiding drama. The city hardened me in ways that small-town life never could. I discovered that survival meant being 2 steps ahead, reading people's motivations, and never showing all your cards at once. During those 4 years, I only made it home for Christmas and summer breaks. Each visit, I noticed Carol moving a little slower, forgetting small things like where she put her keys or what day it was. But she was still working, still caring for her patients with the same tender attention she'd given me. I graduated with decent grades and big dreams, ready to take on the corporate world that had always seemed so glamorous from the outside. Sometimes during college breaks, I'd visit Carol at the nursing home where she worked. Watching her with dementia patients taught me everything I needed to know about patience and grace under pressure. She'd spend extra time with Mrs. Patterson, who forgot her children's names but remembered every word to songs from the 1940s. Carol would sit beside her bed, humming along while Mrs. Patterson's eyes lit up with recognition. "Memory is precious," Carol would tell me after particularly difficult shifts. "When it starts slipping away, all we can do is hold on to the love underneath." I saw firsthand how dementia stole people piece by piece, first the recent memories, then the distant ones, until only fragments remained. The families who visited looked exhausted and heartbroken, watching their loved ones fade away gradually. Those experiences made me fiercely protective of Carol's dignity, even when her own memory started showing cracks years later. I understood what we were fighting against, and I promised myself I'd never let her suffer alone. The irony wasn't lost on me that the woman who taught me about caring for others would eventually need that same care herself. 6 months before Alexander fired me, I started as a Alexander eating assistant at Alden & Co. The office felt sleek but cold, all glass and steel with motivational posters that felt hollow. Everyone wore polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. My first day, Alexander gave me a tour that was more performance than orientation. He spoke loudly about excellence and accountability, making sure everyone heard him laying down the law for the new girl. I noticed immediately that some employees seemed relaxed, while others moved like they were walking on thin ice. The favorites got warm greetings and casual conversation. The rest of us got brief nods and watchful stares. Alexander's office sat in the center of the floor, surrounded by glass walls that let him observe everything. He liked being seen, liked the power that came with his corner view and executive desk. I could tell he was the type who measured his worth by how much control he had over others. During that first week, I kept my head down and my ears open. I learned which bathroom stalls people used for private phone calls, which copy machine conversations revealed the most office gossip, and exactly how Alexander's favor system worked. Knowledge, I realized, was going to be my best protection. Within a month, I had Alexander's inner circle figured out completely. There was Cora, who could leave 2 hours early for doctor's appointments that looked suspiciously like shopping trips. Tom got away with missing deadlines because he played golf with Alexander on weekends. Rachel could take 3-hour lunches without explanation. For everyone else, the rules were rigid and punishments swift. Sarah got written up for being 5 minutes late due to a subway delay. Ben lost his vacation day because he forgot to submit a form 48 hours in advance. The double standard was obvious and cruel. I watched Alexander's golden crew stroll in late every morning, coffee in hand, chatting about their weekend plans. They'd dump their work on the rest of us and disappear for long lunches at expensive restaurants. Meanwhile, I was eating peanut butter sandwiches at my desk while covering for their mistakes. I stayed late fixing reports they'd rushed through, answered emails they ignored, and smiled politely when they took credit for my ideas. Alexander loved this system. It kept us competing for his approval while his favorites coasted on their connections. I told myself to keep quiet and play the game, but the unfairness gnawed at me every single day. 3 months into the job, I had Sunday dinner with Carol at her little house. She'd made her famous pot roast, and we sat at the same kitchen table where she'd helped me with homework years ago. But something was different. Carol started the same story about her neighbor's garden 3 times, each time forgetting she'd already told it. She put salt in her coffee instead of sugar, and didn't notice until I gently pointed it out. "Oh, silly me," she laughed, but I caught the flash of confusion in her eyes. For just a moment, she looked lost in her own kitchen. After dinner, she couldn't remember where she'd put the remote control. We found it in the refrigerator, next to the milk. Carol made a joke about getting old, but her smile was strained. That night, driving back to Chicago, I called the nursing home where she worked. They'd noticed the changes too. Small things like mixed-up schedules and forgotten protocols. They were worried about her, they said gently. I knew then that our roles were starting to reverse. The woman who'd cared for me my entire life was going to need me to care for her. The thought terrified and determined me in equal measure. The company holiday party was held at an upscale hotel downtown, all crystal chandeliers and expensive champagne. Alexander used the occasion to show off, giving speeches about our team's dedication, while his favorites preened beside him. The worst moment came when he praised Cora for a Alexander-rating campaign I'd designed from scratch. She'd submitted my work under her name while I was homesick with flu. I watched from the back of the room as she accepted applause for my ideas. Alexander raised his glass to Cora, calling her innovative and inspiring. She beamed and gave a little speech about collaborative effort without mentioning my name once. The room erupted in applause while I gripped my champagne glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. That night, walking to the parking garage alone, I made myself a promise. I would never again need Alexander Alden's validation or approval. I'd find another way to measure my worth, one that didn't depend on his twisted games. I also decided to start keeping detailed records of everything that happened at work. Every email, every conversation, every unfair decision. I had a feeling that information might become important someday. 2 weeks later, the nursing home called about Carol's first serious incident. They'd found her outside in the garden at 2 a.m., wearing only her nightgown, confused and shivering in the cold autumn air. She'd told the security guard she was going to work and couldn't understand why the building was locked. When they brought her back to her room, she didn't recognize the night nurse who'd worked there for 5 years. The director was gentle but firm when she called me. "Vivian, your mother needs more supervision. We're recommending she move to our memory care unit." Memory care. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd known this day would come, but hearing it spoken out loud made it real in a way that terrified me. Carol was embarrassed when I visited that weekend. She kept apologizing for causing trouble and insisting she was fine. But I could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear I'd seen in her patients' families when they realized what was happening. I held her hand and promised I'd figure everything out. I just had no idea how much harder that was going to become. Back at work, Alexander began targeting me with increasing intensity. He'd interrupt my presentations to ask nitpicky questions, send emails questioning my judgment, and make vague comments about my commitment level in front of other people. I started documenting everything he said and did. Every criticism, every unreasonable demand, every time he praised his favorites for doing less work than me. I kept screenshots of emails and wrote down conversations word for word. My desk drawer became a filing system of Alexander's behavior patterns. I noticed he was especially cruel when he felt threatened or insecure. Bad days for him meant worse days for everyone outside his inner circle. Julia, a quiet but sharp designer who'd been there longer than me, became my closest ally. We'd take coffee breaks together and share stories of Alexander's unfair treatment. She'd been documenting his behavior too, building her own case for when the right moment came. "He thinks he's untouchable," Julia told me one afternoon as we watched him laugh loudly with Tom about something that clearly wasn't funny. "Men like that always think they're untouchable." I agreed, but privately wondered if Alexander really was as protected as he seemed. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March while I was reviewing budget reports for a client presentation. Carol's nursing home director spoke in careful, measured tones that told me everything before she said the words. "Vivian, your mother is missing. She was last seen around dawn, leaving through the garden exit. She's wearing her blue nightgown and slippers, but no coat or shoes." My world tilted sideways. I grabbed my jacket and purse, my hands shaking as I tried to process what I'd just heard. Carol was out there somewhere, confused and scared, wandering the streets of a town she might not even recognize anymore. I rushed to Alexander's office, my heart pounding with panic and desperation. He was on a phone call, feet up on his desk, laughing about something trivial. When he saw me in his doorway, he held up one finger, making me wait while he finished his conversation. "Alexander, I need to leave immediately," I said the moment he hung up. "My mother is missing from her nursing home. They're organizing search parties, and—" "Slow down," he interrupted, leaning back in his chair. "Missing how?" I explained quickly about Carol's dementia, her confusion, the fact that she was wandering around alone and vulnerable. Alexander listened to my explanation with an expression that grew more annoyed by the second. When I finished, he shook his head and folded his arms across his chest. Vivian, I understand this is stressful, but we have the Morrison presentation today. You can't just walk out in the middle of a crisis. This is a crisis, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My mother has dementia. She's been missing for 3 hours. Every minute matters. Alexander leaned forward, putting on his fake concerned expression. Look, I'm sure she'll turn up. These things usually work out fine. But if I let you leave every time there's a family emergency, where does it end? I'd set a bad precedent. I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. This isn't every time. This is my mother's life. And this is your job, he replied coldly. The job that pays your bills and funds your mother's care, I'm assuming. You need to prioritize better. His words hit me like a slap. He was holding my financial need over my head, using my love for Carol as leverage to control me. I'm going anyway, I said quietly. Alexander's face hardened. Then don't bother coming back. I spent the next 8 hours searching every street, park, and bus stop within a 5-mile radius of the nursing home. Police officers, volunteers, and staff members spread out across the town, calling Carol's name and showing her photo to anyone who would look. My phone buzzed constantly with updates. Checked the library, not there. Asked at the grocery store, nobody's seen her. Police are expanding the search area. Each empty report made my chest tighter. Carol was out there alone, probably scared and confused, maybe hurt or cold. The temperature was dropping as evening approached, and she was wearing nothing but a thin nightgown. I found her at 9 p.m. near a bus stop 6 blocks from the nursing home. She was sitting on a bench, talking to herself and picking at her slippers. When she saw me, her face lit up with relief. Vivian, there you are. I've been waiting for you to pick me up from work. She looked around confused. Where's your car, and why is it so dark? I wrapped my jacket around her shoulders and held her close, tears streaming down my face. She felt so small and fragile in my arms. Let's go home, Mum, I whispered. The next morning, I got a text from Alexander's assistant. Alexander wants to see you first thing. I knew what was coming, but I also knew I had no choice. Carol was safe, settled back in the memory care unit, and that was all that mattered. I walked into Alexander's glass office to find him in full performance mode. He'd positioned himself where the entire office could see us, ready to make an example out of me for anyone who might consider putting family before work. You made your choice yesterday, he said loudly, adjusting his tie. You chose to abandon your responsibilities and leave your team hanging. That's not the kind of employee we need at Alden & Co. The office had gone silent. I could feel everyone listening, watching through the glass walls as Alexander delivered his public execution. This was his favorite type of moment, absolute control over someone else's fate. You're terminated, effective immediately, he continued. Cora will handle your clients going forward. Security will escort you out once you've cleared your desk. That's when I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. That's when I whispered the one name that changed everything. Martha Drake. Watching Alexander's face crumble was like seeing a building collapse in slow motion. The confident smirk vanished, replaced by pure terror. His hand started shaking slightly as he tried to process how I could possibly know that name. Martha Drake was a secret Alexander thought he'd buried deep. A wealthy widow he'd met through business connections, someone who'd needed private nursing care for her final months. Someone Carol had cared for personally, working directly in Martha's mansion while I helped with the arrangements. During those long nights caring for Martha, Carol had overheard phone conversations between Martha and Alexander. Conversations about business deals, under-the-table payments, and financial arrangements that definitely weren't legal. Martha had been lonely and scared, trusting Alexander with information she shouldn't have shared. I'd been there too, helping Carol with Martha's medications and meal preparations. I'd heard Alexander's voice on speakerphone discussing shell companies and hidden assets. I'd seen documents on Martha's desk that mentioned Alexander's name alongside suspicious financial transfers. After Martha died, her family discovered the missing money. They'd been investigating quietly for months, looking for evidence of who had manipulated their vulnerable mother. I had that evidence. We'll talk later, Alexander, I said calmly, using his first name deliberately. The story of how I knew about Martha Drake went back 6 months, to the period when I'd first started working at Alden & Co. Carol was still working then, taking private nursing cases to supplement her income. Martha Drake had been her most challenging patient, wealthy, demanding, and increasingly paranoid as her own dementia progressed. Martha had specifically requested an experienced nurse who could handle overnight shifts and complex medical needs. Carol had moved into Martha's mansion temporarily, providing round-the-clock care during Martha's final months. I'd visited regularly, helping with shopping, medications, and keeping Carol company during the difficult assignment. Martha's house was filled with expensive art and antique furniture, but also with financial documents she'd scattered everywhere in her confusion. Bank statements, legal papers, and business contracts covered every surface. Martha would pick them up and put them down randomly, never remembering what they contained. That's how I'd first seen Alexander's name on investment papers and partnership agreements. That's how I'd overheard his phone calls discussing moving money through fake companies. Martha trusted him completely, giving him access to accounts and assets her own family didn't know about. After Martha died, those documents disappeared. But I'd taken photos. After our confrontation, Alexander didn't fire me immediately. Clearly rattled, he said we'd discuss this later and told me to go back to my desk. But I could see him through his glass walls, making frantic phone calls and holding whispered meetings with his assistant. His confidence was completely shattered. The man who'd been so sure of his power an hour ago now looked like he was fighting panic. He kept glancing in my direction, probably wondering exactly how much I knew and what I planned to do with the information. I spent the rest of the day cleaning out my desk and organizing my files, but I was really observing Alexander's behavior. He canceled his afternoon meetings, sent his inner circle home early, and paced around his office like a caged animal. Julia stopped by my desk around 5 p.m. "What did you say to him?" she whispered. "He looks like he's seen a ghost." "Just reminded him of someone he used to know," I replied quietly. That evening, I made copies of everything I had about Martha Drake's case. Photos of documents, recordings Carol had made of Alexander's suspicious phone calls, and statements from Martha's family about the missing money. Then I reached out to Martha's son, who'd been investigating his mother's finances. Martha's son, Michael Drake, agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown the next evening. He was a lawyer himself, sharp-eyed and suspicious, after months of discovering how his mother had been manipulated in her final years. "My mother lost nearly $2 million in the last 6 months of her life," he told me grimly. "Money that should have gone to charity and family instead disappeared into accounts we can't trace." I showed him the photos I'd taken of documents in Martha's house, the recordings of Alexander's phone conversations, and Carol's detailed notes about suspicious activities she'd witnessed while caring for Martha. Michael's eyes widened as he reviewed the evidence. "This is exactly what we needed. Alexander Alden has been hiding behind shell companies and fake partnerships, but this proves he was manipulating a vulnerable elderly woman." He explained that Martha's family had been working with investigators and attorneys, but they'd lacked direct evidence of Alexander's involvement. What I'd provided could finally connect all the pieces of their case. "What do you want in return for this information?" Michael asked. "Justice," I replied simply. "And I want Alexander to face consequences for what he did to your mother, and what he's doing to people like me every day." Armed with legal backing from the Drake family's attorneys, I felt more confident returning to work the next morning. Alexander had left me several voicemails overnight, his tone shifting from angry to nervous to almost pleading as he demanded to know what I wanted. I didn't call him back. Instead, I focused on transitioning my work projects properly and maintaining my professional demeanor. I wasn't interested in blackmail or secret deals. I wanted everything to go through proper legal channels. Around lunchtime, Alexander cornered me by the copy machine. "Vivian, we need to talk privately," he said, his voice tight with stress. "I think there's been some misunderstanding about our conversation yesterday." "No misunderstanding," I replied calmly, not looking up from my copying. "Everything is perfectly clear." He shifted nervously. "Look, if this is about the termination, we can discuss other options. Maybe a transfer to another department or extended leave while you handle your mother's situation. I finally looked at him directly. It's not about the termination anymore, Alexander. It's about Martha. His face went pale again, and he glanced around to make sure no one was listening. We can work something out, he whispered desperately. Alexander's attempts to bargain with me became increasingly frantic over the next few days. He offered me promotions, raises, and flexible schedules, anything to keep me quiet about Martha Drake. But I'd already made my choice. The Drake family's legal team had filed formal complaints with multiple agencies investigating financial elder abuse. They'd also contacted Alexander's professional licensing board and the company's compliance department. The investigation was moving forward with or without my cooperation. What Alexander didn't realize was that I wasn't interested in destroying him personally. I wanted the system that protected people like him to change. His treatment of me was just one example of how he abused his power over vulnerable people. Meanwhile, news of Alexander's situation began spreading through office gossip networks. People noticed his erratic behavior, the closed-door meetings with lawyers, and the way his inner circle suddenly seemed less confident about their protected status. Julia and I watched the whole thing unfold with quiet satisfaction. Karma is real, she whispered during one of our coffee breaks, as we observed Alexander frantically making phone calls in his glass office. By the end of the week, Alexander was suspended pending the outcome of multiple investigations. His inner circle scattered like roaches when the lights came on. On my last official day at Alden & Co., I cleaned out my desk while Alexander's replacement, a professional woman named Catherine, who'd been brought in from another division, introduced herself to the team. Catherine's first announcement was that she'd be reviewing all personnel decisions from the past year, including promotions, firings, and disciplinary actions. She spoke about fairness and accountability in ways that actually sounded sincere. Alexander's golden crew looked nervous for the first time since I'd started working there. Cora kept checking her phone anxiously, Tom couldn't concentrate on his work, and Rachel had called in sick 3 days in a row. Julia helped me carry my box of personal items to the elevator. As we waited for the doors to open, she squeezed my arm. You did the right thing, she said quietly, not just for you, but for everyone he was hurting. Walking out of that building for the last time, I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of Alexander's unfairness, his games, and his cruelty was finally off my shoulders. I had a job interview scheduled for the following week at a nonprofit organization that provided services to families dealing with dementia. They'd offered flexible hours and the chance to work remotely part-time. 3 weeks later, I started my new position as a family services coordinator at Compassionate Care Network. The organization helped families navigate the complex world of dementia care, providing support, resources, and advocacy. My office was small but bright, with windows overlooking a garden where patients and families could sit together peacefully. The work was meaningful in ways my corporate job had never been. I was actually helping people during the most difficult times of their lives. The flexible schedule allowed me to visit Carol 3 afternoons a week, eating lunch with her in the nursing home's garden when weather permitted. Some days she recognized me immediately and we'd chat about old times. Other days she thought I was someone else, but she was always happy to have a visitor. My supervisor, Patricia, had experience with family caregivers and understood the stress I was managing. Take care of yourself too, she reminded me regularly. You can't pour from an empty cup. Meanwhile, news about Alexander's legal troubles occasionally filtered back to me through Julia, who'd stayed at Alden & Co. under the new management. The investigations were ongoing, but criminal charges seemed likely. Martha Drake's family had recovered most of the missing money through civil proceedings. 6 months after leaving Alden & Co., I received an unexpected email from Cora, Alexander's former favorite. She'd been fired during Catherine's personnel review, after an investigation revealed that she'd been claiming credit for other people's work for years. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, she wrote, but I wanted to apologize for how I treated you. I was so focused on staying in Alexander's good graces that I lost sight of basic decency. You deserved better from all of us. I appreciated the apology, though it couldn't undo the months of frustration and unfairness I'd endured. Still, it showed that some people were capable of growth and self-reflection when forced to confront their behavior. Alexander himself had been convicted of financial elder abuse and fraud. He'd lost his professional licenses, faced significant fines, and been sentenced to community service and probation. His career in corporate management was effectively over. The Drake family had established a foundation in Martha's memory to protect other elderly people from financial exploitation. They'd asked me to serve on the advisory board, using my experience to help develop better safeguards for vulnerable adults. Today, I work from home 3 days a week, spending my mornings reviewing cases of families struggling with dementia care decisions. In the afternoons, I visit Carol at her memory care facility, where she's settled into a routine that keeps her comfortable and safe. Some days are harder than others. Carol doesn't always remember my name, but she always remembers that she loves me. We look through photo albums together, and I tell her stories about her own life, how she worked double shifts to support us, how she taught me that kindness is strength. The nursing home staff treats her with the same gentle patience she once showed her own patients. They brush her hair, help her with puzzles, and make sure she takes her medications. She's surrounded by people who understand her condition and respect her dignity. My work gives me purpose beyond just earning money. Every family I help navigate the dementia care system is someone who won't have to face that journey alone. Every policy I help develop protects vulnerable people from predators like Alexander. I learned that real power isn't about controlling others or playing favorites. It's about knowing when to speak up for what's right, even when it's scary. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is whisper one name and watch the truth do the rest. Carol was right all those years ago. Kindness is strength, and knowing who you are matters more than what anyone else thinks of you.